sort of a range of panelists here today. There's 2 staff members, so that's Megan and myself. We have one of our faculty with us, that's Jervy, and then we have some students as well. And I'll just kind of let us go down and sort of introduce ourselves. We'll start with Megan and then maybe Jervy, and then we can do our students maybe in alphabetical order.
Hello, my name is Megan. I am one of the other staff advisors. I am probably going to pop my face in and out because I like to eat some snackos and don't want that recorded. So don't worry about it. But hello, I'm one of the staff advisors and I've been working at CCS for just about 2 years now. My anniversary is coming up soon and I'm just happy to be here with y'all.
Jervy, would you like to go next? Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. My name is Jervy Turvalon, and I actually graduated from the College of Creative Studies, and I've been teaching here off and on for a very long time. And it was a great place to learn to write. What I learned to do at CCS held me in good stead when I got to UC Irvine's MFA program, and went on to publish 5-6 books from major publishing houses, and still working in the coal mines. So there you go.
Thank you. I think we've got, if I'm thinking correctly, Kaylin and then Komal and then Madeline.
So hi, I'm a current student and a 4th year. So I'll be graduating this year. And I also work in the office as a student assistant. So I kind of write some articles for the website and stuff like that too.
I'm Komal. I'm also a 4th year. I'm also a double major in film and media studies, and I actually work for the head of the writing and literature program, so Kara May.
I'm Madeline. I'm a 3rd year. I'm only a CCS major. I'm working right now under Kara May as an archive assistant for the CCS archive, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Spectrum Literary Journal this year.
Yay.
So I should probably say my name as well because I never actually said it. My name is Savannah, and I'm the lead advisor at CCS. And we're looking forward to kind of talking to you guys about our program and walking you through why you might choose to come to UCSB and CCS. So our first question is always sort of very straightforward, and it makes a lot of sense because you're all admitted students and you're thinking about where do you want to go, where do you want to submit your SIR. And so one of the questions that we have for our current students, and as an alumni, I'm sure you kind of get to wear 2 hats on this question as well, is when you considered your colleges that you were admitted to, what was important to you when you were thinking about those, and what factored into your decision to come to CCS? And I know it's kind of awkward to figure out who should go in what order. We can probably stick with the alphabetical order just as kind of a pattern, I think. And then maybe Jervy, I'll ask you to go after the students do, just as a both a faculty and alumni, what your perspective on that was, kind of post CCS.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a little intimidating to be the first one, but so when I was choosing which colleges, I was applying to first, I decided that I wanted to go to a UC because I live in California, and also because UCs are, pretty reputable, and they're public, so they're a little bit cheaper. And so when I was thinking about them, I was stuck between UC Berkeley and UC Santa Barbara, and but then I realized creative writing was really what I wanted to do, and CCS is really the only program where you can do it full time, whereas in Berkeley, at the time it was only the option as a minor. And then my sister also went to UCSB, and she chose UCSB because it was the only campus that she visited where people actually smiled on campus. They were like excited to be there and happy, and it has more of a friendly environment I've only been to UCSB, or only attended UCSB, but it seems to have a little bit of a friendlier environment and less competition between students than a lot of other campuses.
So for me, I really knew from the beginning that I wanted to be a writing major. And a lot of schools actually like don't even have writing majors. Like I remember asking on like tours and them being like, oh, I mean, I'm sure there's something in the humanities for you. I actually like originally didn't know about CCS, and I only found out about it because when I went through like the UC application at UCSB, it says like, you know, creative writing asks you to fill out a separate application on the CCS page. And I don't know, it just like the whole program seemed like everything I really wanted. Like it was a place that would allow me to focus on writing. I think that even if you don't necessarily know what kind of writer you want to be, like just the fact that like you get to focus on writing, like if you know you want to write, it's a great place to come and try and figure that out.
Like Kaylin and Kamal, I was really looking for a program that would allow me to focus on writing and to practice that craft and also explore different aspects of it that I hadn't been exposed to before. So CCS was recommended to me by my high school guidance counselor who happened to attend a meeting where we had a representative. And I was like, no, that's the one for me. I just kind of I chose it for the program and the ability to focus on my craft.
Go ahead, Jerry. I guess my question for Jeremy in terms of that is both sort of as an alumni, what drew you to CCS, but also what do you see in sort of the current student body as the kind of students that are drawn to CCS, the writing program in general?
Well, the students are consistently independent-minded. Usually they have the kinds of quirks that I appreciate. I really, really appreciate having students that come with science backgrounds because, you know, I kind of like that analytical aspect in the writing. Also, I think I learned as much from the students as I teach. The students are pretty remarkable, and I do really enjoy having the kinds of time that I have with them. I will say something about CCS from the beginning. The way it started with Marvin Mudrick, you know, I took a lot of classes with him, and he was quite a mentor to me. And CCS is, I think, maybe the only university in the country that did something that, that I still do, that Mudrick did, and he used anonymity in the classroom. We never knew whose story was being read. He read them cold. And so the story was critiqued and not you. And so if you were a guy that wrote in the voice of a woman or a woman that wrote in the voice of a guy, there was never any notion about appropriateness, which I found to be pretty remarkable. And I'm really stunned that it isn't used in more universities. Also, as a writer of color, I found CCS to be incredibly welcoming, and it still is. And so students from diverse backgrounds, I think, feel pretty welcomed at CCS. Maybe in some other departments, they might have, you know, maybe some reservations about how they fit into the broader scheme of things. And I think that's because at CCS, particularly in the literature major, creative writing literature major, diverse voices are genuinely welcome.
So one of the sort of other questions that I think that kind of leads into, for me, just talking about sort of a mentor figure is one of the things that makes CCS unique in the big scope of UCSB, because UCSB is such a big school, and sometimes it's difficult for undergraduate students to connect with faculty, but at CCS, each student is assigned their own faculty advisor to guide their academic career. And so we'll start with the students again. What role does your academic advisor sort of play in your in your time at CCS? What do you gain from that relationship?
There is so much to gain from having a mentor, and so in the third year of the writing and literature program, we have junior tutorial, which is like independent one-on-one meetings with like an advisor. But in my year, I happened to do it with Komal, who's another one of the students here. And so we had like a little three-way, and we would meet and we would discuss each other's stories. And Kara May, our advisor, would share her work too. We wrote an academic paper all together, the three of us. And having that close one-on-one relationship allows that faculty member to get to learn your writing and your goals about writing and other things that go on in your life and stuff like that too that could contribute to your writing. So I came in as a dystopian writer. I like YA and dystopias and Hunger Games and all that sort of stuff. And as Kara May learned that about me and learned about like my background at home and stuff, she was like, you should try creative nonfiction. So then I tried creative nonfiction, and then there's just so many layers that can get added on as your mentor gets to learn about you, and it can only benefit your writing.
Yeah, so for me, actually, like there's this like one story I always tell, and for me, like Kara May has like played a big role in sort of shaping where I've gone in like what direction I've gone in this school. And for me, it's like she always gives me some good like hard truth, even when I don't always want to hear it. And in my second year, she did a lot of work to push me. Like I'd come into the college wanting to be a novelist, even though I was not, in fact, writing a novel, which, you know, it was great. It was a great way to be a novelist. And I remember like sitting down with her about my mid-residency review, and she basically had a conversation where she told me that like maybe I didn't sound like a novelist to her. And even though that was really hard to hear at the time, and I was really mad at her afterward, I came to realize that like she was right, and I was just holding on to something because like it was so part of my identity. It was hard for me to let go. But like I think and I eventually would go on to discover screenwriting, so there's like a happy ending to the story. But I think that like I've always gotten such honest feedback from Kara May, whether it was about my life or about my stories. And I find that so valuable to have in someone who's mentoring, you know, because honesty is like what is going to get you where you want to go.
So Kara May was my advisor for the last 2 years as well, and this year I actually, for my junior tutorial, started working with Jervy on my piece. And I was in a small class with a couple other people, and it was just the four of us doing feedback on each other's stories and exploring the narratives. And because we were all writing fiction, we got to work with each other. We had two people, myself and Belle, writing fantasy, and Haley was writing more literary short fiction. And so we all got to interact in that way, and that's been awesome. But Kara May was my mentor last summer for a research project that I proposed, kind of mentioned to her offhand, and she's really, really good at motivating you and being like, no, this is a good idea, chase this. And she does give you very honest, hard to hear feedback sometimes, like Kamal said, but she's also has taken the time with me to edit my short stories and my essays, and due to some of her edits, I did get published twice. So she's always there to, you know, be your best representative and really help push you through and find what you're good at and find what you love to do, which is awesome.
Jeremy, I wanted to ask you, sort of from the other side of the desk, what is it like to be a faculty advisor to students? What is that like?
Well, it seems pretty natural, and I would also say that the CCS network, people who come to the program that are working in various fields, we hang out and we work together and collaborate outside of this program once you graduate. And one of our students, Lena Garcia, she now runs a magazine, Local Voice Lit LA, where all the work is created by, well, majority of the work is created by writers from California that reflect the diversity of California to get into the schools. So right now she's a graduate student at Berkeley and she's running a magazine, and she was one of my students. And and actually I didn't invite her into the position. Somebody else hired her. It was just kind of a weird serendipitous, wonderful event to have her running thing. So I think that intimacy that the students are speaking of is genuine, and it's growing. One of the things I hope for the CCS program as it continues to grow, our program, is that we continue to develop deeper ties to the literary community in Los Angeles, because it creates even more connections and potential for opportunities for our students. And all of my students know that if they need anything of me, if there's something I can do to help them, I will do my best to manage them. And also, lastly, one thing I want to say is that failing at a project that you're working on is a wonderful thing to do. You need to risk take when you're writing. You need to make mistakes and fall flat on your face, because you learn more from failure than you do from being kind of cautious in your writing. And a lot of our students do that. So that's a very encouraging thing.
And I think that's one of the things that's really valuable about CCS, and about that we are, and this is going to sound sort of obvious, but that we're a college of creative studies, and being creative, no matter what field you're in, is a potential welcoming of failure. And that so many of our students learn potentially for the first time, because many of our students have been very successful in high school, that failure is a great teacher, and a really great opportunity to be able to fail in a place that supports your failure, and wants you to learn from that. So I think this is sort of a natural lead-in, and I want to point out, Madeline earlier said, "Oh, I'm just a CCS student." I don't think there's any such thing, so we're gonna backtrack on that. My question is, what kind of research and creative activities are you currently involved in? What are you working on? What are your projects? And when did you sort of start pursuing your own ideas in CCS?
Is that direct? Okay.
I think we'll start with students, and then we'll check in.
Okay.
There was a lot to that question, so
Yes, there was.
I'll try to hit the things. So what I'm researching right now, so I kind of mentioned earlier, so I'm working on a dystopian novel about, it's kind of set in the future. There's lots of prison. My character's a snarky butthole. I really like character, and like I've learned that my 3 talents are character, dialogue, and humor. I suck at studying, so that's something I learned to work on. I also write short stories that are kind of absurdist humor. And then I'm doing some research. So one paper that I worked on was, I've called it Abductions to Dystopias, and then something longer than that. But it kind of, so I was in a religious studies course that was looking at first contact with aliens. So there's like, that's a great thing about being at a large research university too, is that you get to have like all these insanely wide classes. You're not stuck with just like the literature classes, which are also great, but you have so many more options. So in that class, while I was reading about the abduction narrative, I was like, wow, that sounds like the same thing that's going on with dystopian authors and those characters. And then so I've kind of tied them together and like pointed that out. What was the rest of that question?
So sorry, there was so much of it. So part of it was about what kind of research are you involved in, and how did you start getting involved in things at CCS?
Okay, so how I started getting involved in things, I don't know, I just feel like I kind of ended up in things. So my first year, I worked on Spectrum. In my second year, I was editor-in-chief of Spectrum. I went to a writers conference with Spectrum, the literary journal, and then each year I've also gone to the Santa Barbara Writers Conference, which the owner of that conference generally provides some scholarships for CCS students to go. And it's the week after finals in spring always, so it's nice. You get to go right into the conference, and it kind of fuels you for the summer. Yeah, I guess I'll leave it there.
That's okay. If it helps, I made a note for my future panels that maybe I'll separate these out. So,
Okay.
so we'll see how that goes. Go ahead and take a stab at it, and
Okay.
we'll see. We can always ask follow-up questions.
Okay, so I bounced around a lot in my first 2 years, and it was really, I think, a symptom of just me not really knowing what I wanted to do. So I was like, I'll just like do everything. And so my first year, I was in a writing studies class with Kara May, and it was like, it's one of the intro classes. You have to take an intro to creative writing, literary studies, and writing studies when you come into the major. And I actually had no idea what writing studies was, but it's like basically the study of why we write, what we write, and any kind of study that studies writing. I did not explain that well, but you know, if you come here, there will be better explanations. So my first year in that class, I had done a study about the way that STEM majors feel about writing. And so my second year, I decided to expand upon that. So I used a Robb Fellowship, which is a fellowship program through the writing department that gives you $750 to just go off and do writing research. And I decided to study how STEM majors felt about creative writing. And that was actually really interesting because it wasn't just me, it was like a whole group of students were doing like projects with faculty members. So it was like you met with them and like you were constantly updated on what they were doing, and it was sort of something that was outside of my classes too. And it was just a really cool thing to like work on, where I was interviewing people and finding out like what they felt about this. And I never really considered that this was the kind of research I could be doing in writing. So that was really interesting. And then after that, in terms of creative activity, I mostly write screenplays. So for my senior project this year, I wrote a pilot for a television show called American Born Confused Desis. And Desi is a word that refers to anybody who's of like Indian, Pakistani, or Bangladeshi descent. And so for that project, in conjunction, I also wrote a lit review of different films, comics, and novels, which also capture the American Desi experience. So that was also really interesting, because I think that like what Kaylin was saying about how, because she's a dystopian writer, she kind of got into writing things that were about other forms of like dystopias. I think that like it's really valuable to know what has come before on the topics that you're writing about, because then you sort of know maybe what direction to go in yourself, or like what new things you want to bring to that field. No. I don't know if that fully answered the question, but
There's no wrong answers. This is all great.
Okay. Oh gosh. I started out my first year kind of just wandering around. I worked on Spectrum with Kaylin as when she was editor-in-chief. I was a reader. And the next year I was the managing editor of Spectrum, and this year I'm the editor-in-chief of Spectrum. So it's a long relationship with the magazine. And I also did a research fellowship last summer that was studying online short horror fiction and how it moves in a viral manner. And that was more writing studies, like Komal mentioned, which is just, and oh gosh, I am completely forgetting and struggling with how to answer this question.
Yeah.
I just feel like Kamal and Kaylin, I just kind of fell into it. CCS is really, really good, and UCSB in general also is really, really good at giving you a whole bunch of opportunities and options for stuff to do. And I'm really not that great at like being like, I really want to do just this one thing. So I was just kind of sampling, and eventually I found my way into the places where I am now. I have So I went to the Santa Barbara Writers Conference, I did the research, I'm writing a novel, just kind of finding a way through it. But basically, you can do just about anything as long as you take the opportunities presented to you.
All right. I just want to say thank you. I know this is kind of an awkward question and like a really big question to be like, what are you doing? But it's more like just giving you the opportunity to express what it is that you're enthusiastic about and what your passion projects are. Because I think that's something that CCS really embraces, and like we encourage our students to have passion projects and things that are beyond the coursework that you do in the classroom. So I think that's something that I just wanted to make sure we talk about with our prospective students, is that that's part of what comes out of being part of this program, is that yes, you take your coursework and you do your assignments within junior tutorial and things like that, but that there's all these additional opportunities to be engaged and to pursue your interest. Jeremy, I think we'll touch in with you too, just to see what kinds of projects or creative activities both you're involved in and potentially, I don't know, involved in with maybe some CCS students, or what kinds of things that you see happening within the writing program that maybe these 3 students aren't necessarily doing, but that you think are should be shared. I know that was a lot. I keep asking really big questions.
Okay, I would say that most of the students, well, I've done exactly what they've done, are doing. I ran Spectrum, I worked for Spectrum. I also worked at the Nexus as a photographer. For some reason, I didn't want to write for them. But I did publish a piece in the Nexus not too long ago, just because, you know, if I get an idea, you know, it's nice to sell it to the LA Times or somewhere, but occasionally you just want to get the piece out. So I published something actually for the first time in like a long time in the Nexus. I have a lot of projects. I started Lit Fest Pasadena that involves a lot of college creative studies students and alumni. And now we're the 2nd largest literary festival in California and the most diverse. And unfortunately this year we had to cancel because of the coronavirus situation. So we might have a mini Lit Fest in the fall if, you know, coronavirus abates. I'm also involved in something I mentioned before, Local Board Lit LA, because, and again, we've published a lot of CCS people. We actually pay, so I hope our students submit work, because we have published a number of CCS students. And essentially what we try to do is get diverse literary work into the classroom that's contemporary, that reflects the diversity of California. I'm also working on a memoir, and some of my students, in my last class, last quarter, we had a woman from Toby Hunter from Red Hen Press come and talk about what it is to be an editor. And she attended UCSB too. And Red Hen is, I think, probably the largest nonprofit literary publishing house in California. And so I'm working on a memoir, and I'm also working on a pilot for a television show. And usually what happens with these, if you live the literary life, the kinds of things that are challenging is the fact that I have a script pilot on this particular software program, Celtex. And now I just realized they want me to pay $100 to get it, to retrieve my document. And unfortunately, I just realized I misplaced my credit card. So now I'm stuck trying to figure out where I put my credit card. So this is a literary life. It's like being a pirate, as I mentioned before.
I have to say, as staff advisor, sometimes I don't get to see all the like details of what you guys are doing. I get to answer sort of like big picture questions of like, am I graduating? Yes. Like, so in some ways this is just as exciting for me to hear about all the things that you guys are involved in, that, you know, maybe I get little pieces here and there, but it's always really exciting to hear what CCS is up to. I want to take a minute just to check in, because we've been talking for half an hour. If you haven't used Zoom before, there's a little reactions button down at the bottom. And I just kind of want to ask to get like a thumbs up from our guests, just to make sure that like things are tracking, you're feeling good about what you're getting, and following along, that we're doing a good job. All right, we've got thumbs. All right. Just wanted to check in, and let's see here. Okay, great. So one of my next questions is sort of, we've talked about sort of all these extra projects that people do outside of classes, but I want to take a chance to talk about classes specifically, and then what Megan and I might do is also put on like our staff advisor hats and just talk about GEs afterwards. But in the meantime, I want to ask about CCS students and sort of coursework and your course load. One of the privileges for CCS students is that there's sort of a greater access to advanced coursework for CCS students. You might start upper division classes earlier than some other students at UCSB. You might take graduate classes that are relevant to your field or your interest. While you're still an undergraduate student, you might be taking sort of a larger course load depending on what your interests are in a given quarter. And I wanted to ask how you manage that workload and what kind of choices you make, because you're taking those courses in addition to all the other things that you've already listed us as being part of what you do. And especially for writing students, because I think so much of what your time is invested in is beyond the classroom in order to create the product that's required. So I just wanted to ask about that, how you balance that sort of course load and coursework in with your life.
So I'm definitely someone who tends to take way too many classes, just always way too many classes. So like right now, so the typical amount of classes generally is like 16 units or 4 courses at a time. Right now I'm in 5 and have a job, so that's a little bit more than some people tend to do, but I think that's pretty typical of a lot of CCS students. And like Savannah was saying, we do a lot of things, but for me, it's always been like those things. So the classes I take generally I can take a class, but the writing that I produce in those classes generally informs my larger projects. So I could be taking a workshop class and end up writing chapters of my novel, or I could be taking other sorts of classes, like a magazine writing class or something like that. And a magazine article that comes out of that is something that I'm actually looking to publish, looking to add into my final portfolio. So I don't really feel like I do that much outside of my classes, because it just happens to work out that like what I'm doing in my classes works for the rest of it. I also, how I manage my workload, I don't know. I love doing the writing so much, I guess, that I'm chill just sitting in my room doing my homework, which is really just writing a lot of the times. As for GEs, I just wanted to say, like, having the option, some people might come in and be like, GEs, but they have been some of the most informative courses for my writing that I have taken. So I've taken astronomy. That was probably my favorite course I took at UCSB, like, at all so far. And then I've taken sociology courses, and those ones are really helpful. I also just wanted to say that we've been talking a lot about research, but I feel like most students come in more on the creative side. Like I came in being like, I am never going to do research. But then I developed an interest in it, like I think a lot of other students do. So don't feel like this isn't a place for you if you're not interested in research yet.
So I think that, you know, like as with Kaylin, I've lost my train of thought. As with Kaylin, I also like started taking like a lot of units really quickly. And for me, it was just like, I really like being busy actually. So it was really nice to just have like things to do. And it wasn't like I had like 3 math classes, although I did at one point actually, but like that's a time I don't speak of anymore. But it was more like, oh, there's a journalism class and I'm writing about, I don't know, I'm not going to give examples. I can't think of anything right now. Okay, there's a journalism class, or there's a screenwriting class, or there's a creative nonfiction class. Like I went down all these little rabbit holes of different types of writing or different types of classes. And it was really interesting because I had never sort of maybe written for the screen or written creative nonfiction. And so those were really nice discoveries that I got to have because I had to explore outside of the college and I had to take classes other than those in CCS. And I think it just like, you can't write about writing, you know, I mean, you could, but most people I know want to be fiction writers or they want to write about the world around them. And in order to do that, you have to know about the world around you. And I think that like taking classes outside is really helpful. As for how to manage that, I think like you just have to know how much you can handle. So I think there were some quarters where I went overboard and at the end I was like, oh no, okay, never doing that again. But you just have to know there's like, it's not about necessarily the number of units. It's about what kind of classes you're taking and how much of a workload you can handle. And there's no pressure to go over that number. Like do what makes you comfortable because that's how you're going to produce the best work anyway.
Yeah, I'm kind of the opposite of Kamal and Kaylin in that I definitely do not like taking more than like 16 units a quarter. That's about my max. And for my own mental health and sanity, I don't push myself too far in terms of like how much coursework I put on my own plate. And that's for a number of reasons. But right now I've got 16 units. And then I'm also doing Spectrum, and I'm also doing a job, and I'm also running a game that takes like the time of a job. And it's all stuff that I want to be doing and that I really like doing. So that's basically how you manage it. Is if you're taking a bunch of classes or you're doing a bunch of different things, as long as they're things that you enjoy and things that you find rejuvenating and not super stressful, you'll be able to handle it fine. But it is about knowing your limits and taking the time to give yourself mental health days or take time for yourself, self-care. What was the rest of that? There was another part of that question.
I think that was pretty much it. Sort of how do you manage your workload in addition to everything else you do? And I thought you nailed it. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, GEs, that's what it was. There are some seriously awesome GEs at UCSB and some seriously awesome classes in a bunch of different departments and under a bunch of different professors. So take the opportunity to take the weird classes and learn about, you know, aliens and religion or human sexuality or the history of disease and how people have interacted with it, because it's all super cool. And you're going to learn a lot and become a better writer and a better human being by expanding those horizons.
So what I might do is I'll put on my sort of just general GE hat, and then maybe Megan will want to weigh in for a minute. But I do want to say that so CCS has a requirement. So UCSB in general requires general education courses. CCS requires 8. So this is fewer GE classes than the rest of UCSB. And those classes are specifically required to be outside of your major field of study. So what this might mean is for Komal, if she took a film and media studies class and then came in and said, can I count that as my GE? Would be like, nope, that's you. That's what you're doing. If someone was doing creative writing in terms of like comic layout or something like that, and they took art classes related to that. I know art history has an understanding manga course, those kinds of things. And so someone came in and said, well, you know, I'm working on comics. Can this understanding manga art history class count for my GEs? Be like, nope, that's your field of study. The goal is to stretch yourself. And I do think that writing and literature students, excuse me, are some of the most open to actually taking that stretch because you pick up all these things that maybe you weren't anticipating and you gain these new interests. And I think writing and literature majors are some of the most open to that experience. And it can be really enriching. And some of that comes from the fact that you are now at this really large research university, and there are all these departments out there that you, I guarantee, have never been exposed to as a field of study before. Maybe you talked about philosophers in your history class. Well, now you can actually just take a philosophy course. And there's now a plane flying over my house. So I think this is a good opportunity to transition to Megan, maybe, if you have anything you would want to add.
I don't think I have anything I want to add. You kind of nailed it. Yeah, you nailed it. I was just gonna say that if you are thinking of a GE like the manga one, and we know that you are wanting to pursue that, we'll be like, excuse me, I think that is in line with what you really want to do. Let's think of something else. And so we're not going to say don't take any of those classes, but just what is going to count to check off certain boxes and what is not going to check off certain boxes. But yeah,
I think that's a great point, because it's ultimately, we're never going to discourage you from taking a class. If you're interested in it. It's just a matter of like, is this a class that pushes your boundaries? And that's really what we're looking for. All right. There's another sort of technical question, and our students may or may not want to pitch in on that, but it's just sort of a question that we do here at CCS from time to time. And so this is where kind of we'll keep our staff advisor hats on. And a question that we sometimes get is, can CCS students study abroad? And the short answer is yes. I don't know if any of our panelists have done that. No.
Oh, yeah.
But that's okay. What we can say is that there are so many different ways to go abroad. Some students go abroad with the goal of like pursuing their general education requirements, and they think, I'm going to go off and I'm going to do this thing, and IMAX. And so they go off and they go exploring and they do these things. There are programs out there as well that could be a good fit for you as a writing and literature major. And what I will add to that is that the Study Abroad Office, their acronym at UCSB is EAP, so it's Education Abroad Program. They're some of the most enthusiastic people I have ever met on campus. Like, you can walk into their office and be like, oh, I want to study abroad. And like, people rappel down out of the ceilings and they're like, where do you want to go? And there's different financial aid opportunities and scholarships and places all over the world that you can go, whether you want to end up in Southeast Asia, or you want to go to South Africa, or you want to go to West Africa, or you want to go to South America, or you want to go Western Europe. I mean, the gamut is there. The length of time is there. So some students go for a semester. Some students, maybe I wouldn't advise this as much for CCS, but some students will go for a full year. Some students will seek summer programs. So they want to go abroad, but maybe they can't take the time out of their academic year to go. There are summer programs as well for students to go. Some of them involve foreign languages, and some of them don't. There are so many programs out there that are taught in English. So it sort of depends on what you're looking for. Komal, I think, wants to make a point, and then Madeline also knows two people who've studied abroad. So I don't know if she would want to speak to maybe some of their experiences as well.
I also know a couple people who've gone abroad, and they went abroad for the whole year. I know one girl went to France, and she was a poet, and another girl, Mallory, she went to China for a year because it was sort of in line with her research. And I think as a CCS writing major, especially if you're not going to do a double major, a lot of those requirements get done pretty quickly. And then after that, it's kind of about you shaping the major into what you want it to be for yourself and what you want your portfolio to reflect once you graduate. So if you want that to be via studying abroad, like, it's totally doable. You just have to talk to your advisor and plan it out and make sure like you're all on the same page about what you're doing.
I was just gonna say, I know 3 people in the major who have gone abroad for the entire year for one of them, for half a year for another, and then I believe that the third just went over the summer. So totally possible, totally doable. You just need to figure it out with the advisors.
I think it's one of those things too that if you kind of think about it early enough, then like you have the time to do it. It's a thing that's kind of hard to do last minute because you have to get your passport and you have to apply to the program and you have to be accepted and you have to do all these things. But if you kind of come in willing to be prepared to make that an opportunity for yourself, then you can definitely make it happen. I don't know, does anyone else have anything that they would want to share about studying abroad? I don't know, Megan, if you kind of have anything from a staff perspective, or Jervy, if you have students who've gone abroad to particular programs that you would want to brag about?
You know, I just really enjoyed having students from Germany or Asia or Africa in my classes. So my experience is it's just really fun to have people that come from different cultures in their writing workshops.
That's true. It is a two-way street. So UCSB students can go abroad, but then we also host students from other cultures and countries as well. So there is that kind of cross-pollination that's really exciting. Okay. One of our other questions that's sort of very practical and literal, and that I frankly don't have much experience with, but I'm interested to hear from our students, is one of the things that we get from prospective students is, where did you live your first year? Were you in the CCS housing, or were you mixed in with the general population? How did you feel about that? Those kinds of things. The sort of practical, just being a student living at UCSB stuff.
In my first year, I lived in a residence hall, and I actually came to school like 6 weeks early as a part of the freshman summer start program. So I got to take a couple classes and explore the campus while it was super empty, which was a great experience for me because, you know, I don't want to do the bike paths when there's so many people. That's really intimidating to me. But also I made that decision because my sister was 1 year older, and I was like, if I start while she's there, like, I'm going to rely on her. So I was like, no, got to go early. I thought that was a great experience. I was in a triple that was a little tight, but I thought I would have such a big problem going and living in a dorm from having a single room at home. But you actually adapt pretty quickly, and there's other spaces you can go. You know, if you need some more alone time or something like that, you can go outside, or you can go to the library or something like that, so that you can handle that. And then in my older years, my upper division years, I moved to a UCSB apartment, and they are very nice, very nice. I like them a lot. Would recommend.
So for my first year, I lived in Santa Catalina, and it's also known as FT, and it's off campus. And that was like the draw against it is that like it's a little bit further. So like if you don't have a bike, you have to bus to class, and I don't have a bike because I cannot bike. I mostly chose it, I think, because I remember reading that was the only dorm left where they had double rooms, and I didn't want to be in a triple. And they also had like the shared suite bathroom instead of like the bathroom that like everybody shares. And I also like really wanted a good bathroom. So that was like, for me, like the busing, like I was fine with it. Like I made it work because like I wanted the double in the bathroom. But I actually really liked it. I think that like for my first year, it was really nice to have just like these very two like sort of separate, like distinct spaces of like home and school. I've lived in a different place every single year that I've been in college. Like I've never lived in the same complex twice. And it's been just a really interesting experience to have to like, you get really good at moving. Like in my first year, I was this like total mess when I was moving out, and now I have like a system. So, I mean, if that's something you wanted to get good at, but I think it's really interesting to like move around because you sort of get to see the campus and the town from like these different points of view. Yeah, I think it's really interesting.
All right, I'm gonna just say, I think Jervy's gonna step away, but I just wanna thank him for being here, and we'll give him a good wave. And just thank you so much for your time, Jervy. We really appreciate it.
No problem. I would stay longer if my little 4-year-old is attacking my stepson. So
All
You
right.
can take care. Okay.
All
Bye-bye.
right.
Hi.
Bye.
So my first year, I lived in Pendula House, which is the CCS building in Manzanita Village, in a triple. It was a really, I didn't know either of the two people in my triple, and it was a relationship that we were all kind of just like coexisting as best we could in the same space. We didn't really jive. But the building as a whole was really awesome, and it was like every night there were people in the lounges doing homework together, people downstairs playing games together, or people just like having a hangout in a lounge space. It was really cool. And that's not something that's limited to the CCS building, both in that I know that every freshman dorm hall is really close knit because it's like those are your peers and you kind of form gaggles of people and you explore campus together because you don't know where anything is. And it's really fun. But also, the CCS building will be open to you even if you're not in that house, and if you want to have a study group there, like that is a spot that you can go in addition to the library, in addition to the CCS building, to have a study space or to chill with people and stuff. My second year I was also in Manzanita Village in a different house, and this year I started out in the San Joaquin apartments with 7 people, which is too many for me. So now I am in the El Dorado apartments, which is also a university-owned apartment. And as of right now, I'm the only one in this apartment, which is really nice. But I had 3 lovely roommates, and the university apartments, to back up what Kaylin said, are super nice. They're like really well maintained. You can get help like 2 days after you submit a ticket. They really do take good care of the students that live there, and it's really nice.
Thank you guys. I know it's sort of a very technical question, but I think it's one that students get really invested in because it's a big hurdle, I think, to moving onto campus is like, what is it like to live here? Megan, I know sometimes you think about that in terms of like orientation. Do you have anything you'd want to pitch in on housing that students come into?
Yeah, I think just one thing I know that students will think through, or maybe it's because I tell them this and they think through it, is that you want to have a general understanding that you are going to be spending a lot of time with your CCS cohort and people. And so if you're somebody who might like get overwhelmed by being around the same people all the time forever, you might purposefully choose to not live near CCS or at the CCS house, and just give yourself a little breaky break. And another reason people choose to do that is not even if you get like overwhelmed by lots of people or the same people all the time, is if you're just like a super social butterfly and want to be sure that you are going to get a group of friends that's not related to CCS at all from like day one, via if they are your roommates or just people in that hall that's not the CCS hall, where you can just like automatically day one meet other people that are not in CCS, and then other people will be like, actually that's who I know I'm going to feel really comfy with and at home with, and they're going to understand me on this level that just nobody else will. So I actually do want to choose to try and live at the CCS house, because I know that when I do go home from school, which is, it's all the same, because you live on campus, but like when I go home, that I will be welcomed into an environment that I know I'll be cared for and seen and understood.
I think I saw a couple of hand raises, so we'll touch on that too. Madeline, were you agreeing and saying I'm one of those people, or were you thinking you had something you wanted to add?
I was agreeing. I am a textbook introvert, and spending more than about 2 hours around people at any given time stresses me out. So I was just saying, like, yeah, I can't handle constant social interaction.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, just making sure. I was actually the resident assistant, so the RA, the person who's like in charge of the dorm. Madeline's here in Pendula House. And I think that like the uniqueness of a CCS dorm is that most of the time when resident assistants like work in homes, like once a year is over, that's it. Like, I mean, I've like almost never seen someone from my first year like in the same like hall walking around campus. Like I've never run into them again. And it's totally fine. Like I'm like it's part of the experience, but the uniqueness of a CCS dorm is that even after you've left, you are going to continue to run into those people. So that's just like, you know, it's a choice that like you get to make. Like, do I want to know these people and continue to know these people? Like, I still have like residents come to me for questions, and it's because they see me all the time. I still exist.
Yeah.
I'm not someone who just disappeared at the end of a year.
I think this is all really wise. Wow, I'm kind of excited. Like you sort of asked a very technical question about dorms, and like this turned into like a conversation about like making friends at the university and like what kind of culture do you want to build for yourself, and like what kind of network are you looking for, like in your personal space versus like in your academic space. I think this is fascinating.
I have a question.
So
Yeah, if
yeah.
I'd be able to ask about the dorms, what I was wondering, is it Pendula? That's what it's called? The CCS dorm?
Pendula with an E, but yeah.
Pendula. Okay, got it. I knew I was wrong. I knew there was like a letter somewhere that I was off, but I didn't know which one it was. With that, I've heard a couple different things just from going on online forums. Is it gonna be like, because it's like more, all the kids who are in this program, is it known to be like less social than other dorms? Because I know some people love it and some people don't. Okay, so that's not a problem.
No.
You
I would
gotta
think they're a lot
define
of people.
social, because is there less drinking and like rowdy partying than other dorms? Probably, depending on what dorm you're talking about. But is there the same amount of socializing and like getting to know people? Yeah,
Yeah.
you're gonna make tons of friends. Everyone knows each other. Everyone hangs out.
All right.
It's super friendly.
That sounds good. And you totally recommend staying there if I enroll in CCS?
Yeah.
All right. Do most CCS kids stay in Pendula?
So I'm going to speak up and say that currently the CCS house is Pendula. It is not going to be Pendula all the time forever. We as staff have say in which physical space the CCS house actually is at. Currently it is at Pendula, and currently within Pendula I believe we have 65 beds reserved for CCS students. That's not all of the people that live in Pendula. There are spaces like left over for, you know, roommate requests and other people on campus. So currently, and CCS has the option if we want to choose another house somewhere else on campus where we can have more beds, because we found for the last year, I think was the first year when we had more CCS students request to live in the CCS house than we had spaces for. That hadn't happened before. So before times, it was like anybody who applied to live in the CCS house was able to. At this point, we were thinking of increasing the amount of beds that we have, if not moving. And so it is, you have to like apply and write a few sentences of why you would want to live there. So it's not guaranteed. But yeah, and it's not all CCS students. It is still a shared space.
And do most, sorry, just like to reiterate a bit, do most CCS students apply to be in it? Like, how uncommon is it for a CCS student to be somewhere else? Most of them are in.
A lot of them apply.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just as a tag, also, like, most people I know really enjoyed their first year living experience. Like, it doesn't really matter, like, where you end up, whether it's Santa Catalina, San Nicolas, or Manzanita. Like, people, like, you find a way to be happy. Like, you'll make friends, you'll have a good time. Like, it's really, like, it's not going to make that big of a difference as you might think it will.
Mm-hmm. And even though we just talked about all the friends and stuff being really important, you will make friends, you know, from classes and from other dorms that you can hang out with. It's not like that's your only social group forever. Some of my best friends lived in San Nic their first year, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
It's a good question. Thank you. I think we've got maybe time for a couple more questions, and then we'll open it up to just sort of general questions from all of you. So one of the questions that we got fairly often was about class size for writing students. How large are your classes? How many people are in them? What kind of, how personal does the class feel? I know those are all sort of sub branches of that question, but I just thought maybe see kind of what the current students feel like the class sizes are like. Are they kind of just right? What do you get out of it?
So I've been in classes that have like 6 or 8 people in them, and I would say that's on the smaller side, but I've had several that are that size, and then some of them like 10, 12-ish, and then sometimes like 15, 20. I don't normally see classes over that. I think some of the intro classes sometimes have a little bit more, but I don't think it, for the classes you choose that are in CCS, those ones are smaller. And then when you go into like the English department and other departments that are like connected to CCS-ish, but not CCS, so like the English department, comparative literature, the writing program, the majority of the classes I've taken there are like 25, 30, 35 students too, so then they're still pretty small. And then other ones can get bigger, but you know, most of the writing program ones, which I love writing program classes, those ones stay to like 25, and then most CCS ones stay smaller than that. And I have to say, you become, well, depending on the class, you can become so tight with the people in that class just within the 10 weeks that you take the course. And depending on what classes you take, so if you take a fiction workshop and you tend to take fiction workshops, you will often end up with classes with people who are your year or not your year, but you'll end up with the same people a lot of different times. So I've become friends with people who, you know, aren't my year, don't have them in any intro classes, anything like that, but we've become friends because we have had these other classes and they're small enough where you comment on their work, you understand their work, and then they comment on yours, and then you just become friends because they're very seminar based where students have a lot of input.
Yeah, I think Kaylin really covered like basically like there are like variances in like sizes depending on just like how many people are interested in that kind of workshop. Like I think fiction workshops are usually pretty large, like sometimes poetry ones can be a little smaller. I personally have taken a lot of classes in screenwriting, so those are in the film and media studies department. And in fact, like almost all of my friends are actually from the film and media studies department because I've taken so many screenwriting classes, and it's usually the same people because it's actually a theory program in film and media studies. So there's like a very small amount of people in that program who are interested in screenwriting or interested in production. And the rest of them are like theory students. So you see the same people kind of over and over, like Kaylin said. And like, it's really nice actually. Like it's very like, you start to get to know each other and each other's writing over that time. So you're able to like give almost better feedback because you've seen so many versions of something. And I think that the same is also true. Like earlier, Kaylin mentioned junior tutorial that we took together. And like I saw so many drafts of chapters of Kaylin's novel that like I feel like I could there was a point at which like I think my feedback actually improved in quality because I'd seen so many versions, and I finally kind of had an understanding of like this is where she's trying to go. Like this is where my feedback should be. So I think it doesn't just like that smallness, like it helps like both. It helps like the writer, but it also helps like the person in you who's trying to give feedback.
Just to say, the largest CCS class I've been in was Intro to Creative Writing my first year, because my cohort is a bubble year. We've got about 25, maybe a little bit more students now. So we were all in one classroom, plus a couple a couple people who were second years who were taking it because they missed it their first year for whatever reason, like they joined the program late or whatever. And that was probably about 30 people, 32, and that's really the largest CCS class I've been in. But to go back to writing program, I do love their classes, and those are really like intense, like write as much as you can in 10-week classes, and they cap out at about the same place, so those are really cool. And then on the other end of it, you know, you have your 500-person lectures, which are interesting too.
All right, I think I've got one last question for the panel, and then we'll open it up. And just to preview opening it up, if you click on the participants button on the bottom of the screen, it'll bring up a list of everyone who's here, and there's a button called raise hand. And so if you do that, a little blue hand will pop up next to your name, and it'll show on my screen in what order you did that. And then we'll go through and we'll sort of find out what your questions are and see what we can do to answer them. And we'll try to make sure that we rotate turns too. So if you've got lots of questions, maybe pick out the two that are most important to you. And that way we'll kind of move through the list and get a chance to talk to everybody too. So my last question is, and I know this is sort of a really awkward time to be asking this question, but my question is about sort of your future plans. What are you thinking about for this summer and maybe beyond that?
That is a great question. So I applied to graduate schools. I applied to a ton because I just didn't know anything about them. And I have to actually make my decision on Wednesday. But I think I'm going to go on to Stony Brook, which is in New York. I didn't know much about it, but it actually seems very CCS-esque. But it's just a MFA in creative writing. Megan's giving a little applause. Anyway, so yeah, it's in New York, a 2.5-year program. Yeah. Oh, and I was thinking, I guess I might become a writing professor. I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, it's funny because this for me has really bounced out around over the whole year. Like I was so like at the beginning of the year, I was like, I don't know, like maybe I should just apply to things and see what happens. And so I decided to apply to like everything, basically like jobs, like grad schools, fellowships, just like see what I can do. What can I get into? And then like, because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, so I decided to make sure I'd have options when I had a time to make a decision, because I didn't want to box myself into something and then realize at the end of the year, oh, well, I've totally changed my mind. And so it's funny actually, because I had a revelation in the middle of the year. I was like, oh, like I don't need to go to grad school. Like I'm totally fine. Like I think I'm just going to go straight up and get a job. And it's funny that Kaylin actually mentioned New York, because I've been wanting to go to New York for a really long time. So I was like, I'm just going to get a job in New York. But then the economy crashed. So now, yeah. So now I'm actually hoping to go to NYU. I've been waitlisted. We'll see. I may make it in. My goal is to be a television writer. So that would be really nice. If I could get in, you know.
I think we've all got our fingers crossed for you now. So.
I also got waitlisted by NYU. I preferred this anyway, so it didn't matter anymore. Like I had already gotten into schools I liked more than NYU because it was like the last one to come out. But then it's just kind of a pride thing.
Sorry, I just have to add that I also got waitlisted at NYU. So, yeah.
Everyone, man.
The
Yeah.
NYU Reject Club. It's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, from what I've learned about the grad school waitlist, it's like a lot smaller than an undergrad waitlist. So I have a much better, like I'm still holding on to hope because I think I have a much better shot, because they only accept 24 students and they only take 24 students. And then they have those 20 backup waitlisted people, like, oh, 6 people are definitely going to say no because they're going to go to USC. And then 6 people get off the waitlist.
I said NYU Reject Club because my first year, we had a bunch of people across all of CCS who all applied to Stanford and all got rejected. So we had the Stanford Reject Club. But I was applying frantically for internships in January and February, and I was waiting to hear back from a bunch of them. And then this happened, and now I'm pretty much, I'm fairly certain, even though none of them have actually gotten back to me, that there are no internships happening in New York, which is where I was trying to go, or pretty much anywhere for the summer as of right now. So for this summer, I'm probably staying in Santa Barbara, continuing my work with the CCS archive, maybe picking up an extra job over that time, just trying to feel out that situation. For my long-term goals, I'm not planning to go to grad school unless something occurs to me that I haven't thought of yet. I'm probably going to go right into the job market, preferably as an editor or copywriter of some variety. That's kind of where my skill set is at right now. And I don't really have plans other than that. I'm just going to see what happens.
All right. I realized that we didn't touch on something because we were talking about the word summer so much, and I figure I'll just take a moment to plug it. There is one of the perks of being a CCS student is there is a fellowship opportunity for CCS students specifically in the summer. And funnily enough, it's called Summer Undergraduate Fellowship. You'll hear it referred to as like SURF or SUF or something like that. And I think Madeline's gonna, do you want to pop in and kind of summarize it?
Yeah, that was what I did last year for my article on short online horror fiction. So I applied for it with like what I was gonna study and what my plan was, and they approved it, and they essentially like paid for me to live in Isla Vista for the summer so I could work closely with my advisor and do the work that I needed to do for that project. It was pretty awesome. And then at the end, you present at the RacketCon, that's what it's called, which it's a really cool opportunity, and people do it for research and creative projects. So it's something to look into.
So it's definitely a perk of being part of CCS, and it's a fellowship that's not available to the general UCSB body. So it's this pool of money that exists to support students in summer projects, and just to take the time to like be focused on something that you want to spend that summertime doing. We have another fellowship as well. It's called the Travel Undergraduate Research Fellowship. So we have Surf and Turf. That is designed to help students who need to go somewhere to do their to advance the work on their project, and it gives them funding for that as well. So these are both competitive; they're not guarantees, but it's something that is often unusual to find at an undergraduate program. Usually, funding like that tends to be targeted more towards graduate students, but I think that's one of the avenues in which CCS in many ways treats its undergraduate students like graduate students, and kind of helps students prepare for some of those bigger, more advanced questions. But I think what we'll do is we'll open it up to questions just from you guys in general. I'm not seeing any raised hands yet, or little blue raised hands anyway. I don't know if any of you are sort of physically raising them. But we can take questions in chat. We can do it in a variety of ways and just sort of see what's out there. Casey.
Yeah, I was wondering, you talked about it a bit earlier with like critiquing other people's work, but in writing classes, how workshop focused are they? Like how much of it is gonna be like while you're in class doing stuff like reading other work, listening to lectures and things like that, and how much of it is actually peer editing, presenting work, and that type of thing?
Do either of you want to speak to this? Okay. It depends on the class you're in, which is what, it's going to be a lot of, it depends. Generally in the writing program, you spend a little bit more time focusing on reading other sources or just doing like writing essays. In CCS, the creative writing classes I've taken have been entirely workshop focused, with very few like, oh, let's read this short story because it's kind of related to what we're studying. And then it's all of class time is workshop time.
That was a really good question. Michaela, I think you're next.
Hi. I was just wondering, for you guys, all of you mentioned that you're sort of going into like very different fields and like a variety of fields. So I was just wondering, like, if the writing and literature program is sort of has more of an emphasis on like being a novelist or being a writer, or if there's more like freedom, like connections to like the publishing world or the editing world. I was just curious how that works.
I would say that the writing and literature major is like what you make of it. So I know a lot of people who've gone in like a ton of different directions. Like you sort of see here, like the three of us like have gone in like completely different directions. And so it's like, yeah, you can join Spectrum, which is like editing and publishing. You can be a double major in film and media, which for screenwriting. You can go on and just do so many different things with your major. I know like a double major in religious studies. I know someone who's double majoring in theater. And so it's really just, there are so many opportunities if you just find the ones that you just pick out and choose the ones that you want to go for.
I'll add on to that. I think there's a lot of people in like the senior or the fourth year right now who are a bit more novelist based, but there's people who are interested in video games, there's playwrights, like literally you can do anything you want and all of the above. So, and the program allows you to do that. And they find even if CCS doesn't offer those courses, or if a faculty member doesn't do that, they will connect you with someone at the university who does.
I mean, I'll add a little bit more. It's definitely a build your own major, find what you love and want to do. We have a couple, like I said before, my year's the big bubble year, so I can say with confidence that there is at least 3 people who absolutely love writing studies. There's a bunch of poets, there's a bunch of essayists, there's a bunch of novelists, there's a bunch of people who are into sci-fi and fantasy, and some people who hate sci-fi and fantasy. It's a massive spread of people who come into the major and what you discover you love to do there. I will say that, I would love to be a novelist and, write novels for a living, but I also know that it's really, really hard to do that. So saying like, I want to go into publishing and editing is kind of my way of saying like, I'm going to write and I'm going to, have something else to do while I write so that I can pay the bills and stay alive.
I'll add too, just as a staff advisor, part of something that's sort of common among all CCS is there is a sense that by being within the program that you have some flexibility in determining how that program is going to suit your interests and how it will help you excel. There is sometimes a risk of overreading that as being like total freedom, and that's not quite true. It's not like you're not completely building everything from scratch. There is designed to be a structure and a pedagogy in place to help you figure out what the best way to approach that path for success is, but there is very much a desire to support students in finding that success. I'll temper Madeline's statement just a little bit because I wear that staff hat, and there's sometimes a misperception that I can just take whatever classes I want. There is a process, but it's a good process, and it's a process that's designed to be supportive in what it is that you want to do. All right. Any other questions? I feel like we've covered a lot today, but I feel like we've got some good progress. Casey, you've got another question. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm talking a lot. I just want to ask one more, mainly because we've already talked about screenwriting and stuff. How much screenwriting and playwriting and TV writing, just general screenplay scripts, can you be able to do without double majoring in something like film or theater or a medium like that?
You can do whatever you want. I mean, it's really, there's not really a rule that says like you can only write screenplays if you're a film and media double major. You can also, like, I'm pretty sure like you can get into the classes without being a film and media double major. Like, it's totally fine. Like, it's totally up to you. And most like of the film and media like electives, like they're pretty open to anybody. But I personally, like, I knew that like at that point I was like, I'm gonna be like working in television writing or something film related. And it's very different to come at the classes as a CCS major than it was to be a film major and to have that sense of community. And that was really important to me. And I think that like, I also, for me, one of the things was like, I'm also going to have a degree in film and media studies. And that's really important to me going forward, because like, I think for, especially like for me applying to like film and screenwriting schools, like I have a degree in this now. It's not just that something I'm trying out, like it's something I really worked hard for. So, but you don't need that.
I'll add on.
Oh, go ahead.
So I don't really have any experience doing screenwriting, but I thought I would try it out a little bit. So there's like clubs on campus too that you can join. So Colmel was running Writer's Room, so you can go and like share your screenwriting stuff and get critiqued by other screenwriters. And then I also wrote a screen thing in a humor workshop that was CCS based. So it wasn't explicitly screenwriting, but I was like, I'm going to do this one as screenwriting.
I just wanted to add as well, and I'm sure a number of other people can speak to this, but just sort of in general, one of the things that's unique about Santa Barbara is that there are a lot of connections to various LA creative industries without having the competitive. So, you know, it's not the same as being in LA, but there's a number of people who are in the Santa Barbara community who are passionate about these kinds of fields and subjects, but without the sort of competitiveness of the community of being smack dab in the middle of LA. That for many of the opportunities, and again, this is very general, you know, if there's something going on in Santa Barbara, the students who would be applying for those opportunities are going to be Santa Barbara students, as opposed to sort of, if you're in LA and there's an opportunity in LA, as a Santa Barbara student, you might also be applying for that depending on what your summer plans and your availability are. But you're also then entering that pool with everyone else who's in the LA area. So not many LA students come to Santa Barbara for opportunities, but there is sort of a two-way street. I know that that's very broad strokes. So there's truth to that, and there's some that it's like, you know, but there's a blend that's kind of unique about being in Santa Barbara, and being in Southern California, but kind of away from LA. Michaela, you've got your hand raised as well, so we'll go to you next.
Yeah, this is just a more like general question. You guys talked about it a little bit, but I was just wondering like what the extracurriculars and like clubs are like on campus, and sort of how connected they are to CCS or like the broader community.
There is literally a club for everything. I'm pretty sure there's a club to play Quidditch from Harry Potter. There was like a club, I think, for Costco, like Costco club. They just went to Costco together to get samples. So like there's a lot of different writing clubs. I know that there's one in CCS run by Belle, who runs Pros and Cons. She's another fourth year. And that's for like fiction writing and critique. So that one's like fully involved in CCS. Like they meet in CCS. It's mostly comprised of CCS students. But then there's also like other like writing groups on campus that aren't affiliated with CCS, but you're still obviously welcome to join. Like there's no restriction. So like Kaylin said earlier, I run this club called Writer's Room. And so that's for screenwriting students, or sometimes, I mean, we've also read prose sometimes in there, or poetry. It's really not, there's no restriction, but like we do mainly focus on screenwriting. And I'm sure there are various other, like I've personally never gone to a playwriting club, but I'm sure if you looked for it, you could find it. Poetry club. There, I mean, actually, like I haven't looked for it, but I've seen signs everywhere in the building. Like, you know, there's like a whole database of clubs. So if you want to find something, you will. And if you can't find something, you can start it.
Another one our students tend towards is there's a club called Laughology, which is like comedian based. So you can like perform comedy, and I think you get critique or something like that too. So that's another big one for the writers. But then there's also the Bottom Line and the Daily Nexus, which are two student-run newspapers, which isn't really a club, but it is another extracurricular activity that a lot of our students do.
if you write 6 articles for the Daily Nexus, they start to pay you $10 an article. So
Megan, I feel like you jumped in a little bit. I don't know if there's any other like clubs or student organizations or anything like that that you were thinking about adding. No?
Not really. Yeah, not really. Just there's literally everything. There is a Costco sampling club, like that exists. And I'll just say, like when I got to UCSB, I'm an alumni too. There was not the club that I wanted, and so I was that person that just made it. And it was very successful, and I just walked around campus and I said, do you want to be on my water polo team? Do you want to be on my water polo team? Do you want to be on my water polo team? And anybody who was in a water polo t-shirt, I literally just went up and was like, do you want to be on my team? And 2 years later, we were at the national championships. Like, it works. If you go out there and like put yourself out there, you will find the people. There's 25,000 people on campus, and there are definitely 10 that have similar interests to you. So, yeah.
All right. I think we're kind of wrapped up. I just wanted to make sure. Oh, we got oh, I forgot what your name is in my spreadsheet, but I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself, and I'm gonna unmute you.
Okay. Hey, my name is Quans. And just I applied for creative writing. But like I really in the future I really want to do like a lot of different things. So I was kind of thinking like are there any like in Santa Barbara, are there any like great like opportunities that the city has to offer? I know that like the college has like a lot of great different clubs, and like the writing program is great. And I kind of see creative writing as like a way to do a lot of different things that I want to do. Like I want to make music, I want to act, I want to, of course, write for TV. I want to back too. So you said like there's a framework, but there's also a lot of freedom within choosing your classes. So like the 2 questions I have are like how interactive or like how interdisciplinary can I have my classes like that among my interests, and then also like what opportunities does the city have to offer?
I want to ask a follow-up question. What,
Sure.
like, are you, like, as far as from what the city can offer you, are you looking for like museum internships or like kind of other like creative artsy stuff, or like just jobs in the city? Like, I want to have a side job that has nothing to do with writing.
Yeah, I mean, that too, I guess, like also just like, I don't know, maybe places to perform or like,
Okay.
do like kind of stuff like that, maybe clubs or something like that.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of the students want to answer first.
there's something that like I've heard like being here, which is if you can talk your way into it, you can do it. And so like what you're asking about like art classes, theater classes, sure, why not? Like if you can convince a professor to let you take it, you're in. And that doesn't really require any kind of like commitment of a major or anything. As for like outside opportunities that the city has to offer, I really don't know, because I personally have never, I guess, looked for what the city has to offer, because like I was just like looking in other directions. But I know that there are museums, there's classes sometimes that happen in museums. Like there's like a bunch of stuff that happens around Santa Barbara because it is Santa Barbara. Like I've seen the opera downtown for a class actually, but still very cool. So I think like sometimes you find what you're looking for. And so if you were to go out and like search like through Santa Barbara for the kind of things that you're talking about, I think you would be sure to find them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can I pipe in? So that's a good question. That's one thing where myself and Savannah would be great people to ask, because we live here in the city and go out to downtown Santa Barbara and know a little bit more so than our current students who are here in Goleta. And so I will say that I know students who are performing with their bands that they form with their buddies at Soho, which is a club downtown. At the Granada Theater, you can get internships working at certain theaters, like in the ticketing offices, or doing like social media for them. I know a lot of Santa Barbara, I will say, like Santa Barbara proper, the city is a little bit older. And so there are a lot of opportunities where they're like, we need this young energy, this young help to get us onto social media, to make that presence like be not looking like from the 90s. And help with engagement. And so I know a lot of our art students will have internships at art galleries and museums downtown, and they've loved that. So there are opportunities to do stuff outside of the like UCSB little bubble. Yeah.
And what I'll add to that too is kind of like what Komal is saying is that UCSB is in many ways a very large bubble. So like you can live within UCSB just fine for like 4 years and like be like, great, I had my experience. Santa Barbara it's definitely not like the largest city in California by like any remote stretch of the imagination. It is a very sort of physically bounded community because you've got ocean on one side and mountains on the other and then like vineyards on either side. But and so that makes it really beautiful. But the part of Santa Barbara that is engaging and vibrant and wants to be involved, they're very passionate about Santa Barbara students. They want to involve them. They want to get a good student and to give that student a very enriching experience, and they want to help that student network. So what I have seen from the city of Santa Barbara in terms of the students who go outside of UCSB and engage with that community is typically a very, very rewarding experience for them. So, you know, maybe it's not a bazillion clubs on every block, but the places where a student puts in the effort to get engaged tends to pay it back, is what I think I have to say about how the Santa Barbara community works that way.
All right, great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.